Hello, hello.
Hello.
Can you hear it?
Yep, got you.
My first Instagram ever.
Yeah, love it. We're popping cherries all over the place these days. Glad that you were able to reboot the Frog Catcher 100 account. I feel like that's going big places. You're a visual guy. You're a photographer. Visual formats. I think this is you're gonna warm up to Instagram real quick.
I used to lurk on it, so
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we welcome all lurkers here over at the Belinsky News Network.
I don't
Um,
th I don't think I was frog catcher last time, but who knows?
yeah. Yeah. We'll dig into the the evolution, the genesis of Frogcatcher name at some point when you least expect it. But for the moment, Mr. Arnade, whose last name I mispronounced about 800,000 times when I was speaking about you in absentia, it is a pleasure to have you here tonight. Um, you're someone whose work I caught my eye a few years ago when I was really starting to try to see things from a different perspective, understand, what seemed to be incredibly rapid changes in the political discourse, social mores, and just the big shakeup that happened, with the Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders movements in 2016 and everything that emanated from that. And you have a fascinating backstory that's kind of almost chilling to the bone in my eyes. That you were on Wall Street for over 20 years. You were in the thick of the bond trading world and market. And after the financial crisis in 2008, you decided to take a turn in life, and that the corporate world and the pursuit of profit and deals and transactions in the market was no longer how you wanted to spend your time, and you decided to go explore America and many of the communities that have not caught up or adapted to the modern economy as well. And maybe if you could tell us a little bit about how that decision was made, what that transition was like, and what spurred you to do it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you. And I don't, I've been asked that question 1,000 times, and I wish I had a better answer, at least a succinct answer. Um, I think people who know me well, my transition to being a banker was a little bit odd for them. I had come from academics, but um, but I became a banker, and I joined Solomon Brothers. Have you ever seen The Big Short or Liar's Poker? That was basically me. I was a bond trader, um, um, sitting at a desk with a row of computers, making bets on on everything, flying around the world, and all that crap.
Hmm.
And the way I relaxed, uh, to the degree I relaxed on the weekends, was I just go on these immensely long walks, like 25-mile walks through the city. I walk from my place. If any of your viewers know Brooklyn or New York City, I'd walk from basically the Brooklyn Bridge to LaGuardia, Brooklyn Bridge to Shea Stadium, Brooklyn Bridge to
Yeah.
JFK, and just would walk and just kind of. Eventually, those walks started becoming more. I bring my camera and I started using it to just go no place really, just walk and talk to people, go to bars, go to nightclubs, go wherever people, wherever my Mexican bars, places where I generally wasn't expected to show up. And I started listening to people's stories, and after the financial crisis happened, those walks took on a different vibe. When I started realizing that I was depressed about my work, I didn't like it, but I started learning that I was enjoying these walks and talking to people, and then just hearing different perspectives, and particularly the walks that took me to places where, again, like I said, I wasn't supposed to go, like the Scorpion Bar in Roosevelt Avenue, where I think I'm the only non Mexican to have gone in there. I would stay there until 3 in the morning and just talk to people. And then I eventually brought my camera, and people started telling me more and more of their stories. And the walks really took on a very different atmosphere. They became almost, a political exploration or a sociological exploration. Um, and eventually, I remember one time, I think it was 2012, and I was still working on Wall Street at the time. I said to one of my trader friends, I've walked everywhere, but I haven't really gone to the Bronx. And they said, whatever you do, don't go to Hunts Point. So of course I went to Hunts Point. And the minute I went in there, it's New York City's poorest neighborhood. It's the known to have the most crime. I think it's the 41st precinct, and it has prostitutes and sex workers and addicts. And so I ended up spending 3 years basically hanging with them, photographing them, listening to their stories. I quit my job in 2012, and then although there was a surreal period where I was on the trading floor from like 6 till 4, and then at 7 till not midnight I was in crack houses talking to people, and I just ended up. Um, it was never intended to be a project. It was more about the photography, more about just learning in a very different way, learning from people, and it eventually became political as I got frustrated with of the inequality I was seeing. Literally hanging with heroin addicts under a bridge, and just seeing that a lot of them were, as talented as and as clever as some of my Wall Street trader friends, and certainly, you know, had some of my Wall Street trader friends grown up like some of these people, they would have been drug dealers equally. And then around 2015, I took the show on the road, as it were, and just I pulled I put a bed in my van, and I just drove 400,000 miles around the United States for 4 years, going to basically places where people told me not to go, similar things. You're in LA, and so in LA, I spent most of my time in Compton and Pico Rivera, I think, in Downey and East LA, in those parts, I spent, I think, a month there, and again, in kind of places I shouldn't have been, probably, in retrospect. But this whole project took place during the election, so I myself traditionally come from the left, and so I started getting, I was on Twitter at the time, doing these pictures and telling these stories and writing these articles, and I said, "Hey guys, I think Trump's going to win." And everybody on Twitter told me I was a fucking jerk, an asshole, a racist, all that crap. And I'm like, no, I really say this as a warning. You can listen or not. Because I was just seeing people were just pissed, and they were going to go for the long shot, and the long shot won. And so eventually, this all became a book, which I called Dignity, because one of the things I found in these communities was, in these places I wasn't supposed to go, Gary, Indiana, Portsmouth, Ohio. Just if you're not supposed to go there, I was there. One of the things I did to find out where to go, how to go, I would say on Twitter, "Hey, I'm in Michigan. I'm in southern Michigan. Where should I go?" And everybody would go, "Oh, go to Kalamazoo. They got a great bespoke wine bar," or go to Ann Arbor, and wherever people. And then I would put an X through those cities and not to go. And eventually, the places no one ever told me to go was a place like. So I ended up in Battle Creek, which nobody said to go to Battle Creek, which is where they make cereal and where people are pissed because the cereal companies moved to Mexico. So that process resulted in the book Dignity, which is, I don't think, very political, not explicitly, but I think implicitly is very political. And then the reaction to the book was interesting, but we can talk about it in a little bit.
For sure. So, okay, it's an interesting phenomenon in how you started off in New York and exploring some of the quote-unquote places that you weren't supposed to go. Because in New York City, and this is something, there's a distinction between New York and Los Angeles. In New York, even in Manhattan, although it's not as pronounced as in the outer boroughs, the places you are supposed to go and the places that you're not supposed to go are a lot closer. Okay? You go to the rest of the country, you got to travel. You got to cover some ground to go from the place that time forgot to, bustling cosmopolitan modernity. And New York is always really interesting in that it somehow, people who may be on Wall Street have all of this, a lot of poverty, a lot of it's right under their noses, and they interact with it each day. But they somehow seem unaffected by it in a lot of ways. Is that what you found?
Yeah, I mean the great um, irony or hypocrisy is of the left is the most unequal cities are run by Democrats.
Yeah,
So what you said about the massive inequality, both racial and class, is Boston, New York City, Washington D.C., Detroit, Chicago, Milwaukee. And there's a lot of massive inequality. I mean, again, Hunts Point is 15 minutes from Upper East Side,
yeah,
and so or Upper West Side, which is presumably more liberal.
yeah,
So it's really frustrating because you know we on the left talk a good game, but we live differently. The Hunts Point again is 99% black and Hispanic, and there's very few people on Manhattan who know about it or go there, or other than the only time they may go there is to get their, or they should go there because that's where auto body shops are. You can get the illegal auto body shops are there where some of the drugs are sold, and so you can get your car fixed really cheaply. But
for
you know,
sure. And a lot of what we're talking about right now is described in stark detail in the period of the 80s in a book. When we spoke earlier, I mentioned the author Tom Wolfe. I think the book Bonfire of the Vanities is the greatest American novel ever written, and it
yeah,
explores just this.
yeah. The irony is, nobody else has picked up on it, but Bonfire of Vanities is about a bond trader who he hits a prostitute with his car in basically Hunts Point.
Not a
Uh,
problem. He's with a woman who's not his wife.
yeah, but the car hits what though? The car hits a
Okay,
prostitute.
they're two. No, they're two gentlemen. They're two young black men.
Okay,
And
I
what was brilliant about what Tom Wolfe does is he puts the situation on the margins where it's a situation where rich white Sherman McCoy could believe that the two young black men are coming to rob him, or they could just be coming to actually help him with his tire. And one of them is a very intimidating guy, and the other one's not intimidating. And it just plays on that marginal issue.
I haven't read it for a while, but the place I remember, the place where he exits and he exits. It's exactly where I used to exit every day to go into Hunts Point. He actually did his research. He actually went up there in his white suit and hung out in the Bronx in the 80s, which was a
Incredible.
much but yeah. So that sort of inequality that he highlights in that book is I mean, it's something that I think we on the left kind of I speak for myself, on the left, overlook, which is that again, the most unequal cities are run by Democrats, and
which
so
which the right wing will not forget to remind you via memes and other other materials. Okay, so we'll circle back to some of your experiences and the approach you took in starting to have these conversations with people, but some dynamics that were not necessarily active in the 80s when Tom Wolfe wrote Bonfire of the Vanities, but that have manifested themselves the past 35 years since. We've become a globalized world. Supply chains are globalized. The communist nations that were not available in the market economies in the 80s when there was still communism, those opened up. And a trade agreement, NAFTA, in the early 90s opened up Mexico. Lots of American industry that was maybe not supporting people in the Bronx, but was supporting a lot of American workers due to, one, the communist nations opening up, two, NAFTA, and three, advancements in technology, communication, and supply chains. A lot of industrial capacity and manufacturing left the U.S. to flow to places where it could be done more cheaply. And obviously, this is it's something that kind of was death by a thousand cuts. People didn't necessarily notice it a lot along the way, other than the people in the communities that you saw. So maybe if you could tell us a little bit about your perspective on on the impact of globalization, the rise of China and becoming the world's manufacturer over the past 30 years, NAFTA, and how the impact of globalization really, blew a hole into the soul of working class America.
Yeah, free trade is probably the place I've had the biggest intellectual change or political change, and it came from basically listening to people. I mean, the losses from free trade were always just considered to be something like a negative number in a spreadsheet. Like, don't worry, more people will benefit than those who lose, and so net is a positive. But you go to like Danville, Virginia, I remember, and you the ninth time you're talking to someone, they said, well, I said, what happened? Well, they point over there and said that empty lot used to be a factory where people could walk out of high school and get a job, and they can't anymore. And the factory moved to Mexico, or the factory moved to China. But the first few times I was actually that well actually guy. I'm like, well, actually, free trade is, and then eventually I'm like, fuck, shut up, just listen.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm the one here who's wrong. It's white, black, Hispanic communities that have been hit this way. And Milwaukee's North Side, in my book, I talked to a lot of older African Americans in Milwaukee's North Side, and they're like, there were so many jobs I could walk. You get fired at one factory, you walk across the street to the next factory, you can't do that anymore. Those jobs are gone. Gary, Indiana is a perfect example of that. So NAFTA and free trade, and especially trade with China, basically have played right into the, I have a friend who just simply said who spent 40 years working in China, and he's like, I can't believe you guys agreed to send your factories over there because they're just going to steal your ideas, like
all day, all day.
And it's just like we played ourselves, and the argument amongst people on Wall Street at the time, they called it labor arbitrage, which is you move your factory wherever people are the most desperate, or wherever you can pollute the most, and but more than that was the argument was there were two arguments to try to justifying screwing American workers. One was what about world poverty? We have to help the world. Oh, great, okay. And number two was, which is a great sentiment, but the problem is you don't have to do it and harm the U.S. And number two was we're gonna democratize China. We're gonna open up China, which is like, yeah, that didn't work. Look at the NBA, and so look at Hollywood. They're scared to make moves, and so
look at TikTok and all those people dancing in stupid videos that you mentioned who don't seem to care that they're essentially making content for a company that the Red Army and the Chinese Communist Party are entirely plugged into.
Yeah, the obsession or the adulation towards the Chinese Communist Party. Look, I don't. The Chinese people hate the Chinese Communist Party more than we hate them. So, when this idea that attacking China is somehow racist is absurd. I don't like the Chinese Communist Party. It's a totalitarian regime which is repressive and which seems to be doing some genocide light on some groups of people. So it's not a good place, and we really needed to be the fact that we then were willing to move our factories over there to screw towns like, again, we didn't screw New York City and we didn't screw with LA. What we did was we screwed a lot of America who don't have a platform to yell about it. And when they do yell about it, they're racist, or they don't know better because they don't know the math. Just look at my spreadsheet. Free trade's good. It's helping you. I'm sorry you lost your job. Get a U-Haul, move you idiot. And so it's just awful. Globalization is a wonderful, look, I'm all for a certain amount of trade with the world. That's great. We need to be more cooperative with our neighbors, but sending your factories to where whoever is the most desperate and has the most desperate employee. It's like it's like find the country where people where they don't care who pollutes what. I mean, that's the other crazy thing is the environmentalists. Look at China, man. Like, part of the reason part of the reason people are happy moving the industry over to China is we can't look at the pollution that it causes. Like, it's not here, man, so it's not a problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't, this is a topic I am not as informed on as I'd like to be, but to the extent that the problems in the increase in greenhouse gases and climate change are, everyone's looking at the U.S. and putting the onus on us to lead the way. But look at where all the pollution seems to be coming from. It's not the United States, it's newly industrialized China. But I'll have to see what the correlation is there. Did you, and it really, this all tracks back in a video that's kind of eerie when looking back on it. You ever see the Al Gore Ross Perot debate on NAFTA on Larry King?
I probably saw it live when it came on. I just don't remember. I'm old enough to remember that debate. And watch Ross Perot's vice presidential. If you want to see something that's painful, watch Ross Perot's presidential debate, his presidential candidate. But I don't remember exactly what. But Ross was spot on a lot of things. We all laughed at him at the time, but he was spot on a lot.
Well, I think it just harmonizes so much with the observations that you've made, because you take, on the one hand, you look at the screen. You've got Al Gore, young, good, presents a good image, is speaking very well, is speaking in a very polished manner, and seems to make a lot of, as he's advocating for NAFTA, he's making a lot of sense. They were rational arguments. They don't sound bad. You say, hey, listen, we have the capacity to shift manufacturing to where it's cheaper, it's more efficient. That's going to put downward pressure on prices for consumer goods, and new labor is going to be able to find new opportunities in the United States. And the same thing with China. That some of those observations about allowing China to just make really cheap stuff for us, and then we would be able to liberalize China because they're a far weaker country at the time. You could rationally anticipate that we'd be able to mold them in our image somewhat. And these arguments all sound good. Then Ross Perot comes in there with this kind of nasally, snappy, pugnacious, just common sense, like, what are we really talking about here, Al? You kidding me? That's like, saying all these Southern oil man, it's not an oil man, but whatever it was, he had some great sayings, and he comes in there with just a straight kind of crass common sense. And he turned out to be right, and nice, polished, big vocabulary, cogent argument. Al Gore ended up being wrong, and the people that suffered for it were just community after community of blue collar workers in America. And now, it took 25 years for us to realize what was happening.
Yeah. Well, I don't think a lot of people have realized it. I think they're still in denial. I still get yelled at anytime I mention that I'm not for free trade. And the usual remark is along the lines of, for me, it's like, come on, what do you mean? You're educated. You should understand free trade's good. It gets very frustrating. It's like it's the well actually crowd. Like, well actually. The problem. I mean, it was just the last 30 years completely fucked over the working class.
Yeah.
And they really have no place to go politically.
Yeah, and so that brings us to, and then people like myself, people who are following your path maybe 10, 15 years later, who were educated, were told that free market liberalization was the path, not just economically, but as a personal choices, career wise, lifestyle wise. Start tiptoeing, and then as the economy bounced back from the 2008 crash, things seem to be going pretty well in LA. Things seem to be going pretty well in New York. You got all this new cool stuff. You got Uber, you got Postmates. All the tech companies are doing well. And then this Donald Trump thing happens and this Bernie Sanders thing happens. And you're staring at it going, what the fuck is going on here? What I don't get it. Why is everyone so angry? Things seem to be going pretty well. And it's something that deep into 2015 and into early mid 2000s, just had I couldn't wrap my mind around it. Then I start to look at it, I would look at Donald Trump from afar and the way that he conducted himself. I'm like, who on earth is voting for this guy? It's crazy. Then I read one congressman who's pretty well spoken, who's from Buffalo. I think he was from Buffalo, and he describes why he supported Donald Trump, and he says something that China devalued their currency. It directly led to a factory in my town going out of business, and all of a sudden 2,000 people were out of work and their lives were ruined, and that needs to stop. And I didn't really come around on this for a while, but it was the first, there's like the Russian bleeding in Rocky. It was like, oh, wait, there's a chink in the armor here. I was like, wait a second. There may be something to this, that all the places that aren't LA, New York, Miami, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., that all this brain power, all this talent, all this tech is flowed to, are really not doing too well. And this globalization and the tech world have not served these communities. And so that brings us to you exploring, and speaking with the people who live in these communities and seeing some of the support for Donald Trump in the lead up to the 2016 election. And so what did you see there, the conversations you had, and what were people saying?
I remember I literally left. Donald Trump announced by going down the escalator. Do you remember that when he went down and everybody laughed at it?
I saw it in retrospect when he won and I got knocked upside the head and then went back and watched about 36 hours straight of video. So saw it in retrospect.
Everybody laughed. I laughed. It was a joke. And so literally 2 days after that, I got in my van and I started a 2 month, I would do these kind of like 2 months, 3 weeks, come back home for a week, go back for 2 months. So I did like a 2 month tour out to LA and back. Like I started talking, and the first place I stopped was I think it was Roscoe, New York, a small fishing village, a small place in the Catskills that's been devastated. Now it basically it makes money by New Yorkers from Manhattan drive up there to go fly fishing, and they stock the river. And this guy, the first guy I meet was a tow truck guy, and I asked him, like, who are you going to vote for? After bitching about how the town fell apart and all he did was take wealthy New Yorkers on fly fishing, drive them to and then fix up their weekend homes. He's like, Donald Trump. I'm like, I kind of laughed. Yeah, I figured he was pulling my leg. He goes, no, I'm voting for Donald Trump. And so the next 3 months was everybody talking about Donald Trump.
Wow.
And by the third day, I said to myself, okay, there's something here. And so I started saying on Twitter at the time, I was like, people are really into this Donald Trump guy. This is like, even then I was still making fun of it. It was like, but by the second week, I'm like, okay, there's something here. And I can give you fancy theories, but I can also just give you the voters were doing this. That's what they were doing. They were doing this to the status quo. They were doing this to the least. They were doing this to the media. They were doing this to the blue check marks on Twitter. They were doing this to everybody who said to them, oh, just move. You can find a new job. You learn to code. Job training. I'm sorry you lost your factory, but China needs to become democratic. Or just the scolding, the criticizing, the ignoring. The whole thing of, you guys kept telling me that you don't listen to me when I complain about the jobs being moved. It's the classic, as you said, the Al Gore, serious explainer, big words. This is good for you, don't you know? And the people are like, what the fuck? This isn't good for me at all.
Yeah.
One burned out town after another. And I just kept hearing it over and over. And eventually, by the end of the trip, I was writing pieces saying that, this guy is serious. This people there, there's a real there's a real there's a real need out there. And even in the black communities I went in, one of the things that I get a lot of shit on for saying is, in the working class, I've explained that the places I go are not places that the media generally goes. They're you know they're places that are considered quote unsafe, but they're perfectly safe. And the people in the neighborhoods there are like, they don't hate Trump as much as the media wants them to hate Trump.
But
Some
repeat
of some.
that. The black working class communities, while they don't like Donald Trump, they don't hate them. They don't seem to hate him nearly as much as educated coastal liberals do.
No, yeah, they don't. I mean, they don't hate him. They don't hate him like the elites want them to hate him. There's a few who even respect him. I mean, he's got the bling. He's got it's the what's his name, the boxing promoter guy, Don King.
Don King.
He's got the Don King thing going on. And he understands working class people he's been selling to them for the last 30 years. That's what he does, and so they also working class people watch TV a lot, and Donald Trump was on TV, and so
And
they
he
didn't
was
hate him.
wildly popular amongst the minority communities during the Apprentice days.
Yeah,
Wild.
so I was really surprised when I was like, because, and then again, there was just disconnect when I'd say, I they're not hating on him like you think he is, and then I would, people would say I was a racist. I was like, okay. Or I'm a white guy who shouldn't be talking about this. And so, but there's a voter. I put him on Twitter. I could have been 1,000 of them in Lumberton, North Carolina, which is a really Robeson County is the poorest county in North Carolina. It's a really interesting place. It's 1/3 black, 1/3 white, 1/3 Native American. A lot of people don't know that there's the Lumbee Indians, the Lumbee tribe. And it was another county that voted for Obama twice and went to Trump. It was the OT.
How many were there? Something like 900 counties that did
I
that.
think there was 134. I think it is
Okay,
that voted for Obama and then went for Trump. But
crazy.
and this guy, and I forget the exact quote. I can find it on Twitter or in my notes, but it was he didn't vote, and I'm like, why didn't you vote? Which is most of the people in my book didn't vote. He's like we had 8 years of Obama, nothing's changed. The street still sucks. There's still I'm still working minimum wage jobs, and nobody cares. And so that was a pretty common sentiment, which was a lot of whites, a lot of angry whites voted for Trump, and a lot of angry blacks just didn't vote. And so the net effect was, it didn't. Did my image
You're
go
a
out?
little dark, but if you just said if we can find some light,
Why did that happen?
strange.
But in any case, there was a real. I'll fix this. I'll figure it out. In any case, there we go.
There we go.
In any case, he there was just this real resonance that that happened, and it really was a combination of a fuck you, and now I get this thing right. Let's see. Do I have to change something?
I don't think so. I mean, is there just no light in your room?
No, it just if my camera, my phone fell, and then it came up like this.
Oh, maybe just adjust it a little bit.
Let me say something. There we go.
And there we go. Fantastic.
So yeah, the it was just this real look, people. I use the trading theory, which is people wanted volatility. They wanted to screw the system. It's like you're playing chess. or checkers with somebody and you keep losing and you figure the game's rigged, at some point you just stop playing and you knock the table over, and what a lot was going on. People just knock the fucking table over, and you know, I, I don't think I don't think the media realized how loathed it is, and how the fact that they were attacking Trump helped help Trump.
Yeah, yeah. Um, me and you share some views on the media, on some of these people, the quote unquote blue check marks, people that we probably both spent these types of people. We went to the same schools as they did. You worked on Wall Street with a lot of people who were friends with them and from that same cohort. And these people, even ones like Matt Iglesias is one in particular that you get into it with sometimes. A guy who's clearly not dumb, and particularly every once in a while seems to show that he is smarter than he lets on. And I'm just using him as an example. But these people remain so out of touch and so unwilling to how did they become this leisure class, almost like the French aristocracy, that is so out of touch with everybody else?
I have no fucking clue because
It's crazy.
I'm 50. I'm like 54 years old, and even though I became, I went through, I got a PhD, and I went to Wall Street. Um, my generation, you had to work shitty jobs, and so I picked oranges. I was on a paint crew for 4 years. I washed dishes at a Bennigan's, where I was, not a lot of other college kids were there. Um, when I got to Wall Street, what struck me was the first time when I got to New York City, it was the first time I met people who had never done that. Who banking was my first white collar job, and but it was also a lot of people's first job. I don't think a Matt Iglesias has ever, um, you know, has ever talked to a working class person other than to help. Um, and I don't think they want to talk to him, and I don't think he knows how to talk to them. And I think that's true for a lot of the people at Vox. Like, there's maybe one or two exceptions to that. There's some two very talented people at Vox who come from the working class, but in aggregate, almost everybody is just completely out of touch, and they're bubbled, and to use the cliche, they are bubbled, and there's if you want to really blow your mind, like I thought it was a parody. I still think it's an Onion thing. Do you know who Larry Summers is?
Yeah.
He basically has been the number one most influential Democratic policymaker for economic policy. He is literally a boy genius. I think he was like a chess master at 2 or something. His dad was like something. His dad is like a famous person. He was a president of Harvard, actually. Larry Summers.
It became famous for supposedly calling the Winklevosses a couple of assholes or jerks or something like that.
But he wrote something for the FT where he literally drove across the country, and it's like the dude is like so clueless. Like you have to read his summer trip across. Like for 3 days, he drove across the U.S. and he didn't know. Here's this person for 20 years has been making policy for the U.S. He doesn't know anything about the U.S. Like he makes these observations. Like I had to drive 30 miles and there was no gas station. It's like, well, okay. It's like, all right, dude. But it's just they're completely out of touch. And so when I got to New York, it was the first time I met people who had never, they hadn't been to Queens. They hadn't been to. I mean, again, the only working class people they know is people who help them. Their maids, the cleaning people, the janitor. And again, there's no real friendship there. There's yeah, they're nice to the janitor or the shoe shine guy, and
Sure.
they talk about NBA, but that's not that's not a genuine.
And those are working class people who work in wealthy neighborhoods who
That's
spend
right.
there are other working class people who simply exist in working class neighborhoods 24 hours a day their entire lives. And those are
Yeah,
people that they do not know. Do not
yeah,
know.
they got no. I mean, and the thing is that they're patently uncomfortable in it. You like, they're uncomfortable and they're uncomfortable around people who, I think what's the classic line? The people who shower at the end of the day, not the beginning of the day.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
It's like they just, you know, I remember when I was, and it's so frustrating to me again when it gets to the racial issue, and all the woke stuff, because, I remember when I think it was Amarillo I was in, or Odessa, and I on the road, and I went to Twin Peaks to watch a fight, and it was Friday night, oil and gas industry, and I look around, and every table was integrated. It was all dirty Mexicans, dirty from work, white guy, rednecks, white trash that people at Vox would call racist or would hate, hanging out with Mexicans and blacks,
Sure,
like really
sure.
hanging out, like 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 high fiving, hugging, drinking, all that crap. Just doing what normal human beings do when they hang out. And it's just so frustrating because all these places that the left, hate, like Twin Peaks and Walmart and McDonald's, are extraordinarily integrated. It's they're used by blacks, they're used by Hispanics, they're used by everybody, and they just don't have that. And so, the only place it's like that. What's his name? It's the Tom Wolfe thing about the Black Panthers going to meet.
It's called like the like something, a fancy socialist or something, that
Yeah,
the fancy revolutionaries. So I've got to get the name of that, or it's going to be killing me. But what you're describing are, and I want you to elaborate on the McDonald's piece, is that working class people have concerns that are more primitive and more urgent than all this woke bullshit, right? I mean, these are people that find commonalities with each other because they have actual real life struggles to feed their families, to keep their heads afloat. They can't worry about this stupid, racial divisiveness, because they're just trying to live lives, and they're all living in the same community. And one place that you really opened up my eyes to was that, and also, listen, we can all find reason to criticize McDonald's and it contributing to some of the health problems in America. But something, listen, not everyone can afford. It's simply the only affordable choice. And as you've described, it's a community center and almost a social club in tons of working class communities that cuts across racial lines.
yeah. I mean, again, I literally wrote a chapter on McDonald's in the book about how it ends up being basically the places where everybody hangs out, and it's community centers. Like in Gary, Indiana, it's the community center, and in multiple places it's that way. It's a place that works. It's again, they're largely, to the degree that the neighborhood is, they're largely integrated, and in smaller towns everybody has to go there. There's only one McDonald's, so everybody goes there. Um, like for instance, there's a town in Louisiana, Natchitoches, Louisiana, which isn't spelled at all like Natchitoches. It's spelled like Natchitoches, but it's pronounced Natchitoches. Um, Up in northern Louisiana, which is again half black, half white. I think they have one McDonald's, and everybody goes there, and then everybody gets along. Look, I'm not saying there's not racial tension in the back row, in the working class. There's a lot of racial tension, and it plays out in ugly ways. But at the same time, the lived experience, to use a left academic phrase, is a lot more similar. You know, um, uh, uh, a guy who works in the oil and gas industry and lives in Amarillo or Odessa has a lot more in common with a Mexican American working class guy than someone at Vox does. Even though, quote, this guy at Vox, feels he's more in support of the Mexican American guy. And look, like I said, you can have some jaw drop in the working class. There can be some jaw dropping racism, and there can be some just I remember, um, you know, in Natchitoches actually, go into the Mexican restaurant at night, and these guys talking about how we need to stop the Mexican Americans coming, the white guys sitting at the table being served by the, saying, well, we need to get rid of some of these Mexican Americans who are coming across the border illegally, and then he catches himself. He goes, well, not Miguel. Miguel's cool. And Miguel's like, yeah, thanks for not deporting me. Now that I'm serving you your nachos. So they're. I don't want to just paint this glamorous picture of the working class. They got their problems, but again, it comes from the problems generally come from a little more interaction. I'll put it this way: the racism plays out differently. The racism is more visceral and it's more in your face. Whereas in the white neighborhoods, where in the wealthy neighborhoods, is just don't come into my neighborhood. I'm gonna close the gate. It's kind of like in my neighborhood, where I lived. It was Brooklyn Heights, which is very very wealthy and very inclusive in name only. But the minute that they wanted to create a park that was accessible to everybody in Brooklyn, the neighborhood freaked out and tried to stop the park for 15 years from happening because they didn't want wrong elements walking through the neighborhood. I mean, so the racism in the back row is a lot more visceral, and in the front row it's a lot more structural. Like you create spaces. The guy I'll mention, he's in the book, is when I was in Cleveland during the Republican nomination, GOP nomination for Trump taking it, and I never spent a second in the convention. I spent the entire time in three different neighborhoods. One was a working class black neighborhood, the projects, the Althwaite, I can't pronounce it, Althwaite houses, I think it was, and the other was Parma, and which is a working class white racist neighborhood. And I remember sitting in the bar in Parma, and the guy was like, he was talking about another neighborhood, a wealthy neighborhood that's partially integrated, and I forget the name of it. And he's like, look, I was a fireman in that neighborhood for 25 years. And the minorities moving in there are doctors and lawyers. He goes, I'd welcome that person to move into my neighborhood, but that's not who is going to come in my neighborhood. And he goes, I would love to have a black doctor heart surgeon next door, but that's not going to happen. And so I think the way it's expressed and thought about is very different. And again, there's the wealthy neighborhoods, this kind of champagne limousine liberals.
The Tom Wolfe phrase was radical chic.
Yeah, they let a few people in to make themselves feel good, but they exclude. And again, it's like you can't put someone like at Vox, like Matt Iglesias, into the Twin Peaks in Odessa, and hang in, or hell, go into McDonald's in Gary, Indiana. He's just gonna he's gonna have nothing to say, and he's gonna be scared.
Yeah.
And so it's just this. It's unfortunate that that we notice the racism in the back row, or the working class, and we're quick to point it out, but we don't notice the racism in the amongst elite who absolve themselves of any. Again, you live in an exclusive neighborhood where the wrong people. Perfect example of this is, I spend a lot of time with homeless people, and they spend a lot of time in McDonald's. McDonald's is not going to kick them out for sitting at the table. They walk in. If you have really nothing, what you do is you walk in, you grab a soda cup out of the garbage and a newspaper out of the garbage. You sit in the table and pretend to read the newspaper or read it, and take the refill cup and refill it, and just sit there, milk it all day, or you buy a 99-cent coffee and just milk it all day, and they can hang out there, and they're generally in a lot of neighborhoods welcome there.
And
by
someone was in the comments because they mentioned that me mentioning that McDonald's is kind of the it's almost like the internet cafe for a lot
yeah,
of these. I
yeah.
didn't know that. I learned that from you, and I passed that along to her. And who people in my world don't know that. They can't envision a world where everyone doesn't have internet, where you might have to go to the place where you get Big Macs and chicken McNuggets in order to get Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I mean, in East LA, that's just the McDonald's. I'll tell the story about the woman in the East LA McDonald's who was, yeah, I mean, a lot of guys, a lot of kids hang out there who parents don't have Wi-Fi playing, playing Fortnite on their computer. But so if you're a homeless black guy or homeless white guy, and you walked onto a college campus, they'd call the police on you. And so again, it's easy to be all inclusivey when you're not.
Yeah,
When a poor person comes on, you call the police on them
yeah,
because they're dangerous or wherever. And so again, it's a different form of racism, and it's easier to hide that form of racism. It's harder to hide the racism that happens in the working class.
yeah. And that's what they related to about Donald Trump is that he grips it and rips it. He lets it all out there, just like they let it all out there. Like
I
not,
remember I was actually in my old hometown, which is a old blue collar town in northern Florida or central Florida, and it was a day after the Access Hollywood tape, the grab him by the pussy quote, and I'm asking somebody. I asked this woman. She's like, "Yeah, I'm going to vote for Trump," and I'm like, like, so what do you think about his comments? And she laughed. She goes, "Oh, men are assholes. Men are you just learn how to deal with it." And she goes, she was a forklift operator, and she goes, by the end of the shift, we would whenever I picked up a crate, everybody would yell out, "Grab him by the pussy," and it's like and I'm just like going, "Oh my god," you know, I can't say this on Twitter. I can't report this. I myself was like, oh Jesus.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
but I mean, again, it's people are rougher. They have rougher language, and it was like, what are you going to say back to that? I was just like, okay. Yeah.
Sure.
So I think how these things play out is very different, and people who have different perspectives.
Without a doubt. Shifting to some of the communities that are more, are more associated with poor communities, and particularly by the people that we discuss on Twitter and the blue check marks, and always seem to be coming to the defense, and in many ways rightfully so, of African American in inner cities. We know how we think in our communities about that, but I know that the people who live in these communities have their own perspective on why their communities have the problems that they have, how the system treats them, and what their level of trust is. And I think you've written some really interesting stuff on that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the title chapters is titled racism. So I don't want to diminish the role that racism has played.
For sure.
Gary, Indiana is a perfect example of that. It's a town where when the factories left, the white people could leave and the black people couldn't. And I think one of the people said to me along the effects of is like, finally we had a chance to buy the homes that we wanted to buy, but nobody would lend us the money. So, I think there's I think there's it's just like everything's stacked against African Americans, working class African Americans. They got all the things that are stacked against the working class, and they got the racism, and it's just unfortunate, and it's taken on a life of its own now, where we've gone so far into it that I just don't know at this point what to do, because these communities are so devastated. The jobs are gone. All the things that the jobs held together, the family structure, the community is falling apart. And you know, look, you can't spend times around poor people and not recognize the important role that family plays. Look, it doesn't have to be traditional family. It doesn't have to be, it can be two gays. I don't care, but two people raising a kid has a big benefit. And you know, one of the sad things about poverty is in so many of these so many of these cases, um, the men abuse the children in ways that are just atrocious. And so, and that happens. One of the things that happens is, when I work with addicts, I just stop asking people about, who had childhood abuse. I just stopped asking people about the the males in their life because I knew what the answer would be. Often it was the mother's boyfriend or the uncle, these men coming in and out of the household who were not the father of the child, and it was just atrocious. And I think the right is correct to emphasize the role of the family, but they need to emphasize the role that both structural racism plays. I mean, look, I understand that people on the right get tired of hearing the left yell about structural racism about everything, but there is structural racism in the U.S. and it's bad, and it plays a role. So does the destruction of the family. So does the same thing. They're suffering from everything that the white working class is from, and more, but including the factories being gone.
Sure. Sure. Okay, so we're coming up on an hour. Love to keep going, I think, particularly in terms of, one, expanding on your work with addicts a little bit and some of the issues around the opioid crisis, and then how everything we're discussing is magnified and the issues that are brought to light through the COVID situation. So what I'm going to do is, if you're okay, I know it's late for you. If it's okay, maybe we just go a little longer.
Sure.
I'll stop this video and then I'll fire a live back up and we'll just start again.
So do you want to take a break?
No, not really a break. Like literally, I just stop it so this video saves before the hour's up.
Okay.
And then I start back.
Okay.
Fantastic, guys. We're going to start back up in a second. There's our guest. Okay, so you mentioned your work with addicts, and one issue that is just shockingly people are shockingly unaware on the coasts is the opioid crisis. And me and a friend of mine in Northern California, in San Francisco, he and I talk about this all the time. There are local newspapers in the Midwest that have opioid reporters. They have reporters who are literally employed and on these newspapers strictly to monitor and report on the opioid crisis and opioid deaths in these communities. If you're in LA, San Francisco, with any problems that may be in those communities, this doesn't seem to enter your life at all. What is this crazy bifurcation between this being a working class, Midwestern, small town issue that seems to fly under the radar? And what have your experiences been dealing with it, and how do you envision any way of addressing it?
Again, for me, it's the canary in the coal mine to saying, look, suicide's a pretty, I think it's one of those acts we kind of overlook when you think about it, you're like, holy fuck. Killing yourself is got to be the ultimate fuck you. The ultimate sense of pain, the ultimate cry for, it's no longer a cry for help. It's a very human act. No animals kill themselves. It's a devastating statement about the state of our culture if a lot of people start killing themselves. I mean, think about that. It's like life's not worth living. I'm just going to end it. I'm going to end it. That's a pretty amazingly damning thing, and the fact that more and more people are doing it is is again, to me, the canary in the coal mine that something's very definitely wrong in this country. And so I view addiction as a form of suicide. I think there's somebody in my book, I forget the exact quote, that said, said that, which is, if I had the balls, I'd put a gun to my head and blast my head off. But I'm out, out here every day, killing myself slowly. And everybody who is a heroin addict knows that there's a chance they're going to OD tomorrow and die. And so it's a form of suicide. Yeah, I think you have to think about it in that framework. Why are people out there willing to take the risk to kill themselves? And so that work took place before the election of Trump. So it wasn't surprising for me to see the Trump phenomenon, because I knew something was very wrong with our country. If people are willing to gamble on I think this is well known now. Now that there's been some reporting on it, but I don't know if you know that heroin bags are stamped. They come branded. They're little white bags about this size, and they come branded with usually a red stamp. Obama was a big brand for a while. Total Control was another one. I remember. I used to keep a list of the names. But when someone dies of ODs, people, the first question they ask is, what was the brand? And they go out and try to buy it because it means it's good shit. It's very powerful. So, it means, they did too much and it was potent. So if people are willing to take that sort of risk, that tells you that's another canary coal mine, that something's deeply wrong. It's not surprising they're willing to take a risk on what someone else said was reckless. Voting for Trump is crazy. Doing drugs is crazy too, but people do it. And partly they do it because the people who told them, the scolds, it's the old, if the authorities tell you not to do something, you're going to do it because you don't trust them, just to basically make fun of them. And so, yeah, I wasn't surprised. I see the election of Trump and the opiate addiction as having a lot in common. And we talked earlier about the 143 or whatever counties that flipped from Obama to Trump. I had been to a lot of those, not because I was reporting about Trump, but because I was reporting about addiction. And so those were the same places where Trump did really, really well relative to Romney. Was places where the opioid addiction is really bad. And again,
he was the only one who seemed to talk about it. Nobody else. He was the only politician of either party who I could find who would even talk about it, which is something that was common to a couple different topics, both free trade, globalization, and the opioid crisis. I never heard anybody else talk about it.
Yeah, I mean it was just, again, it's hard to explain. Doing this for 7 years or so, I spent a lot of time. So much of the stuff didn't make my book. I mean, I have like 800 pages of notes, and probably about 10 of it made the book. But it's just like every night when I'm on the road, I got to do something, and so I either went to McDonald's and hung out, and typed up my notes and ate a ice cream cone, or I went to Applebee's and sat at the bar and watched sports, or I went to Twin Peaks, or I went to Hooters, although Hooters is too overlit for me.
Okay.
But I would go to someplace and just hang out at the bar for 3 hours and just talk to people. And the stories you hear, that no one's going to listen to them. Just the pain, the frustration, the hopes diminish, the tells of woe, the just, and then sometimes it's also just humor, right? It's like people roll with the punches. It's so fucking disjoint from so absolutely disjoint from what you see in the news and what you read on Twitter, and it's just, I mean, it's just so, the gap is so huge. Like I remember sitting in this, I think it was Jackson, Mississippi. I was sitting in um, uh, a Mexican restaurant at the bar, and I was drinking my Modelo, and they were drinking. There was like 8 guys who go around and fix cell towers. Um, they climb up to the very top of cell towers, you know, and they drive around the South. Um, and they just show me the most amazing videos of sitting at the top of the cell towers when storms are coming in. They don't make a lot of money. They smoke a lot of dope before they do it, you know. And but it was just, you know. But I remember talking to them about well, there was something going on Twitter. I think people are outraged about something. I don't know, Trump had done something or what have you. But this is a farthest thing from people's minds. They were just talking about, you know, they're on the road for a week and they want to get back to see their family, and you know, and they're just the disconnect is, but every one of them had had a friend who had died of opioid or had a relative who died. You know, it, it's just the difference is just so, it's so frustrating as a writer because or a photographer, because I don't feel like you can communicate how different it is. Like, you know, I just want people to go.
You must feel it when you're there in the moment. It's just down to your DNA.
I mean, it's just like, how do you express how weird? I mean, like, you know, you sit in, you know, you spend 3 years of your life sitting in Applebee's at night talking, listen to people tell stories of, you know, that, and then you go on Twitter and it's just like,
Yeah.
this is just, you know, you guys are screaming about, I don't know what happening on Twitter right now is, you know, what are you outraged about? Like, you know, like the guy who won the Heisman Trophy, he tweeted something when he was 14 or whatever the fuck you're yelling about. And, you know, there's these people out there who, you know, relatives are dying of opioids, who make their money by climbing 500-foot towers while stoned. You know, I mean, it's just, the disconnect is just too great to even to explain to some people. And it's just very frustrating because uh, the people who do that, I mean, they know they're being made fun of. They know that people don't respect them, and eventually this is all bubbled over, man. You know, and so partly partly I'm a bit different than most people who talk about addiction, because I don't think it's a supply issue. I think it's a demand driven things. Like in the addict community, they call them whatevers. I'll use whatever. You know, nobody is just a crack person. Nobody is just a heroin person. Nobody is just a fucking meth person. They use whatever they can. You know, shoot them all in. And I think, you know, if it wasn't for opioids, people would be abusing alcohol more. If it wasn't for alcohol, people would be huffing glue. You know, I mean, there's, you know, the people who I remember the people who it's not funny, but but I have to laugh because it's like, it's so absurd that they would take and don't do this at home, kids. They would take someone had said wasp spray
Oh no.
was like, and so they spray wasp spray onto a screen, let it dry, cake it off, and try to smoke it. I mean, Jesus fuck, you know, because someone had said it gets them high. So it's just like, if people are willing to do that, you know, there's clearly something painful in their lives that they want to numb, and something they want to escape, and they don't give a shit about life. You know, they don't give a shit about dying, and
Yeah.
that's just atrocious.
Yeah. And those got to be powerful. One more a question I have about the opioid, the delivery system for the opioid crisis, because it's not all people traditionally, you know, procuring narcotics and being heroin addicts. A lot of it is through pills, oxycontin, and through the medical system and overprescription of pain medication, and that also plays into an issue of disability and so many people in these communities who are technically simply surviving off disability. because they have no jobs.
Yeah, I mean, working blue collar jobs is painful work.
Yeah.
Like, so you get injured a lot, and then you get, look, the supply matters. It's like it's gonna affect things, but I still believe that if there wasn't opioids, people would still be abusing something. It would be alcohol. It'd be something. Um, you,
Any
you know,
escape,
um,
any escape from,
any escape. I
right.
mean, there's also the other thing is, and one of the things that people don't talk about much, and I haven't written about much. I try, but because it's, there's also the drama that comes with addiction. I mean, one of the things that, um, one of the things that people don't like to admit is, um, using drugs is very social. Um, you go, crack houses are welcoming places. They're basically bars for people who don't have bars. You can hang out, you can talk, you can get along with people, um, that sort of thing. And so there's a social aspect. You get to hang out with people and and do some drugs. Um, and so it fills the role of community for a lot of people who don't have a community. And also it's accepting. You can be anybody. You can walk into a crack house and they're gonna accept you. You can be no matter what you are. People are gonna accept you as long as you do the drugs. So in that sense, it's a welcoming place. It's like a absurd version, a nasty version of that Cheers show, where everybody knows your name or whatever the hell they call it. Everybody's is welcoming. So there's that aspect to drug
And when
use.
your life, when you're struggling and you're in pain and you're pretty much suffering from just numbing and painful and crushing loneliness, you're going to take that over the alternative.
Yeah, and so it serves the role of a bar, and so that's why and then there's the drama. Drug use comes with a lot of drama, and if your life is boring and doesn't feel like it's going anywhere, it adds a drama. I always say about addicts is they want drama in their life, and so that's if you've ever been to a AA meeting or anything like that, that everybody likes to tell you about their drama, and so it fills that sort of role as well. So, but look, I also don't want to. I think we've gone a little bit too far as a culture to saying that addictions, everybody who's an addict is it's not their fault. There's some self, come on,
Yeah. Yeah.
we have to give people back the agency to
Yep.
accept some personal responsibility. And I have as much empathy for addicts as anybody does, but at some level, you have to admit that we can't at the same time say it's nobody's fault, because that's being helpless, and people aren't helpless. People make choices and they make wrong choices, but I can understand why they make the wrong choice more. But it is a choice.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a topic that has evolved over the years, in some ways in the right direction, in some ways in the wrong direction. It needs to be grappled with as America sees deaths of despair shoot through the roof, and even put downward pressure on life expectancy for the first time in decades. And it's a difficult topic, and one that a lot of people are speculating, and you've seen firsthand and really got your hands dirty with. So looking now at we're now 2 months into let's say the very least a unique phase in American life of lockdown and quarantine in response to this pandemic, and everyone's kind of got their form, their personal philosophy or their views, even if those views have changed. Okay, I support this lockdown. I support this quarantine. Okay, maybe I'm devastated by this quarantine. I'm worried about my livelihood, or something. This is actually not a bad break from the stresses of day-to-day life. You could run through 15 different permutations of perspective that people have, but everyone has their own is viewing it from their own perch, and this affects different people at different circumstances. It's easy to say, hey, everybody everybody hang out and stay in your house, and why are you not quarantining? But it's not as easy for a lot of people. Different people, or a lot of people, are critical of others for not taking certain safety measures. Certain safety measures not available for some. Some people in working class communities, you might be living with 5, 6, 7 people in some pretty close quarters, right? I was talking with one friend of mine who has family in the Bronx. If me and my friends, who some of us live alone and a lot of people live and have a lot of square footage, go and break quarantine a little bit here and there and might socialize with a few people here and there, they come back, they're either in a large house with a couple people or they're by themselves. If you live 8 people to a 3 bedroom apartment, if any of the 8 people in that residence go and interact with others, they've wildly increased the risk to the people that are in closer quarters with each other. And that's not even before trying to look at the experience of essential workers who, we really found out who's essential in society. So, you did your pinned tweet right now breaks this down in, very entertaining and irreverent, but very detailed manner of, listen, if here's a general description of the quarantine experience broken down by socioeconomic rung. And, you tweeted that March 27th. What have you seen since March 27th that may have supported or may have contradicted your views and your observations at that time?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think that what is it? Is the alone together? Is that what everybody says now? Is that the little phrase?
That's some bullshit like that. Yeah.
Well, we're not. I mean, I think everybody knows that. It's like it's one thing to be. I mean, I think we can all agree that we don't want celebrities singing to us from their mansions. And I think we can all we're united in that. We're united in a country around that.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think. Look, I say it's like in physics. You look at you learn how things are, the internal truth of things, by slamming particles together, and it's revealing. In some ways, this pandemic is very revealing of things that have always been there, but now we see more clear. As you mentioned, the essential workers. They're essential, but they get paid like shit. There's this framework that Hillary drags out, that she says she won the parts of the country that produce the most GDP. Those people, the people who didn't produce much GDP are the ones now who are feeding you and providing you power while you squirrel away in your homes.
Yep.
So who's essential now? But I think, shelter in place is doing a lot of work there. There's a lot of people, the 4th floor walk up in the Bronx, where three generations share one bathroom and 9 people. It's a lot harder than if you're, in my place, for instance, which is nice. The way I think about the open up or shut or stay quarantine thing is it's like, look, it doesn't really break down the working class versus the rich as much as it breaks down against what I call the entrepreneurs versus the fixed income people.
Yep.
The entrepreneurs, you can be poor and be an entrepreneur. You can be a drug dealer. Like, my friends who are drug dealers are hurting now. It's like it's hard to sell drugs now, and so they want to be opened up. My friends who are CEOs want to open up because they're entrepreneurs. They have a business that needs cash flow. My friends who run small business restaurants want to open up because they have fixed costs and they need a steady income. The people who don't want to open up are generally bureaucrats are going to get government paychecks no matter what. The dismissive term is called dependent class, but people on disability don't care. Like they're going to get their disability. They're going to stay poor, and they're going to be poor. Or they're going to stay poor. That's not changing. But they may be poor, but they have a steady income. So basically, the people who want to open up the most are small business owners because they have the most to lose. They're the most leveraged.
Absolutely.
And then of course, then there's the scattershot people of health issues, like I personally have enough money that I don't have to work for a while. I have some preconditions, so I don't want to open up, but that's me.
Sure.
I want other people to go out and do what the fuck they want to do. You know, the thing that irritated me the most, the story that I think irritated a lot of people was the LA skate park, you know, where they filled it in with sand. I don't know if you saw that. The governor you know, these kids were trying to skate and they fucking filled the skate park in with sand. And I love the fact that the motocross guys came and played in it, you know.
Yeah, life seems to have
Just
life finds a way.
my view is just leave people alone. People are pretty smart. Open up the parks, open up the beaches, you know, let restaurants open up, let people make a choice. You know, I would keep a hold on, you know, gatherings above 50. Probably not best to have a you know, a rock concert in an enclosed environment, things like that for a few months. But um, I think I think it's just frustrating to me to see people who want to stay quarantined forever. Um, Generally, there's very few of those who are not on a fixed income of some sort, either because they're gainfully employed and there's no risk they're going to be fired, or they're a bureaucrat who gets government checks, or you know, again, they're on Social Security. You know, again, you can be poor and still get a fixed income.
Sure, sure. No, and well, listen, the rubber's meeting the road right now. I mean, I was someone who was definitely heavily in favor of the initial lockdown because I'm like, guys, look, we need to we know we need to do it, so if we're going to do it, let's do it right. Was more of my perspective. And then at some point, you see, you know, where the marginal benefit starts to decrease, where each week that you continue to lock down starts to have just less benefit because you've already done what you're going to do. And so, you know, my frustration has just come more so not with people who want to open up, but people who want to be kind of condescending and kind of dismissive of the fact that we have any safety measures and lockdown at all. And I think some people are taking the argument a little too far in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is, you know, this is another wonderful crisis where it exposes the media for being fucking clowns.
Uh,
You know, look, the person who fucked up here, you know, it just frustrates me to see people make early comparisons, like the guy at Vox who compared the United States to Canada and saying Canada is doing better. It was like, what about fucking New York City? Why don't you compare New York City to Canada, and New York City's doing fucking worse? And the reason is because De Blasio is a fucking asshole and he screwed it up, you know. And the adulation given to um, Cuomo as well is also kind of just like mind-boggling. When look, I don't like the governor of Florida particularly, of my home state, but I have to admit, you know, all the hate he got when he was opening up, they did a better job than New York State did.
the number,
Um,
the numbers contradict. The numbers do not support the predictions that his policies and decisions were going to lead to carnage. That was the
yeah, I
prediction.
mean,
Didn't come true.
and what one I mean is the other frustrating thing is watching people gleefully predict things. Like you
Terrible.
know that you know
Terrible.
some people on the left wanted Florida to get hit, and you know some people
Yeah.
on the right wanted New York City to get hit. It's
Yeah.
like Jesus Christ, man! I don't want anybody to get hit, you know. And yeah, but look, hey, our county's still on lockdown because you know, I'm 2 hours north of New York City, and New York City fucked up.
Yeah.
You know, the it's just if there's if there's any one politician most responsible for this crisis, it's De Blasio,
Without a doubt.
and it's mind-boggling to me that there hasn't been more criticism of him. Look, if you're going to criticize anybody, criticize him. You
Oh my
know,
God. Well, just a disgusting human being. I'm sorry. That individual, I look at how in a even semi-rational society. I mean, listen, I try to see, you know, I've got my reservations about Donald Trump, but I can see why people voted for him. What did anyone see about Bill de Blasio?
yeah, you know, again, he was the fact that he was telling people, and he was in the. What frustrates me is the reason why he was telling people to go out and go to Chinatown. He was doing it for he wanted to be politically correct.
Ugh.
I mean, it's like no, it was dumb,
Yeah.
and the way he's picking on the Orthodox community now is
He's
also not particularly.
blatantly, without reservation, picking on the Jewish community. How is the Jewish community in New York not screaming bloody murder about this? Like, I'm in shock.
Part of the problem is I don't know if you know much about the dynamics of New York City Jewish politics, but
I don't.
a lot of the powerful Jews are not big fans of the Orthodox to begin with.
Yeah, that's true.
So
That's true.
so
Yeah.
he's but yeah, I mean, look, the behavior of De Blasio and to a lesser degree Cuomo has been pretty. And again, the media has. I've given up on the media. I mean, I hope the rest of the country knows how slanted they are. It's just it's joking. It's embarrassing.
It's it's like I was saying before. It feels like they are this. They're obviously the defining principle and distinctive principle is not money, right? Like it was with the French aristocracy. It literally feels like they are this leisure class, alienated from the rest of society, insular, that only understands each other and shares none of the views, principles, experiences, and observations about everybody else. And I never would have thought that I would land at this place. Even 5 years ago, when I started kind of starting to see a little bit of this and pick and kind of wake up a little bit to or find a distaste with the media, I'm completely mind blown over and over and over about how just completely immoral and destructive their behavior is, and how these people don't seem to give a fuck. It's crazy.
I mean, they protect their friends, and they're all friends with each other, and they protect each
Yeah.
other. It's a clique. It's a clique,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
they met each other in J school or in undergrad, and so they protect each other's backs. And so
Totally.
you can't screw up in the media because people have your back. I mean, this absurd situation with this New Yorker writer who found out her parents are human traffickers. I don't know if you saw that one.
No, what
It's
was
just I didn't even want to go there. You can it's the latest thing. I guess she was a writer for the New Yorker who some people pointed out that her parents had been arrested for human trafficking back in 2004, and she wrote an essay defending herself and defending her parents, and all the media jumped to defend her because she's on their side, when in fact the story is pretty horrendous. At worst, look, the prosecutors are crazy about human trafficking; they go overboard. But at worst, her parents were guilty of human trafficking, selling. At best, they were scamming. They're Filipinos, and they were scamming desperate Filipinos, giving them green cards to teach here, and then charging them onerous rates for it. You can read it online. Just New Yorker writer human trafficking. But the thing is she wrote this really self-congratulatory, um, you know, story saying how her parents were wonderful and she was wronged, and everybody in the media defended her. Like, oh, I'm so sorry, you're the victim here. No, how about the the 50 or so 60 people that her parents charged $10,000 to come to the United States, and then didn't and they didn't have jobs for. So it's just this they defend each other with no morals. Like imagine somebody on the right. There was a story that broke that somebody on the right's parents were arrested for human trafficking in 2004. Do you think there would be a wave of blue checks defending them, or do you think there would be 500 stories about how evil they were?
Yeah, look, we were right about these Trump people all the time. Look, here's another piece
Yep.
of evidence. Here's another bullet. And I mean, I think finally there are some. I mean, I understand I understand some of the resistance, distaste for Donald Trump. A lot of it, I understand it, but I just don't think they understand how corrosive and how destructive the media is, and how that this is this one singular institution that, for better or for worse, Donald Trump is opposition to, and they're a worthy they're someone who deserves to be opposed.
Look, all he has to do is run against the media, and they're playing, and he sets a trap for them, and they walk right into it.
Over and over and over again.
And it's just like it's just like, yeah, at this point, at this point, if you're gonna, it's kind of it's the Simpson character in the Rake. What's his name?
Satchel Bob.
Yeah, just
Stepping on rakes.
the media just keeps stepping on Rakes all the time.
It's unbelievable. It's incredible.
And so it's just like my battery's dying. By the way.
No, that's fine. Listen, if you want to, I was thinking maybe we do a minute or two on Bernie Sanders and the political prediction for the next 6 months. Okay, so one guy, you've. Would I be correct in saying that you're a Bernie Sanders supporter at the end of the day?
Yeah, I mean that's who I would have voted for if I voted this time. It's who I voted for last time. So yeah, I'm a Sanders supporter. I was less enthusiastic this time only because I'm less enthusiastic about elections in general. But
what about his flip flop? What about his change of heart after being aligned on where you and I are right now in free trade and immigration, and kind of going woke on it out of nowhere after 30 years, which was kind of
yeah, that was a mistake, and that hurt him. And well, I don't. Yeah, I don't understand that. I think he had a pretty consistent view all his life, and he changed it, or he de-emphasized it for whatever reason. And yeah, I mean, it was a mistake. I'm not Michael Tracy, who I speak to now and then. Just wrote a 10,000 piece.
Love Michael Tracy.
He wrote like he wrote like a 10,000 piece 10,000 word essay on why Bernie lost, which I haven't managed. I skimmed it and read a little bit, but I mean, I'm honestly tired of the election at this point.
And it's 6 months. We have an entire lifetime until it's gonna be.
I feel Sanders versus Trump would have been epic. I think it's the election we deserved. I think it Sanders versus, it would have been fun to watch. It would have been good entertainment. Trump versus Biden is boring to me. It's not epic.
It is a great manifestation of all the problems of, and not just that there were problems, that they're kind of embarrassing problems, that they're kind of comically tragic problems that our country suffers from, and that look who we've got with at such a critical juncture. We've got Joe Biden, for all some nice things that I could have said about him over the years. He's clearly senile against Donald Trump and whatever Donald Trump's manifestation of some otherwise worthwhile responses to the media, globalization in China, and this is what we're staring at as a society at this critical juncture. And as we kicked around the name Ross Douthat a little bit earlier today, and with his views on decadence and the way he filters it, that's the vector through which he filters it. Sure as hell to be proving out a lot of his theories that a decadent, soft, non-serious nation ends up with these two choices.
I mean, I think someone commented in your comments saying that Bernie versus Trump would have been the best debates ever, man. I would have pre-gamed that one, man. I would have got, but Biden versus Trump it's just going to be so boring, man. It's just going to be, Biden is incoherent.
Yep. Yeah.
Trump is incoherent in his own way, and so it's just like, at least Trump's incoherence is more amusing than Biden. Biden's is painful to watch.
Yeah,
like I literally, it's like, when you're preparing for a crash in NASCAR, you kind of, it's like watching him preparing for a crash. Every time he opens his mouth, it's just like it's scary.
Yeah. Well, my perspective is, I think it's going to be decadent. I don't think it's going to be boring. I think it's going to be entertaining enough, but it's going to be, it's every time you look at it, you're going to think, oh God, how did we end up here? You know, thinking about I mean, we're only in mid-May. I mean, it's been 2 months. We've got 5.5 months till this election. We've got numerous lifetimes to go until you know, this happens. Anyone who tells you they know what's going to transpire, I think it's a fool's errand. But I think we can wrap up on that note. Chris, this was everything I hoped of more.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm sorry my battery's dying. Like I've never put my iPhone to this much work before.
No problem, no problem. We hope that we have warmed you up to Instagram Live, because here's the thing: you have a lot of amazing things to share and a lot of amazing things to say. This, for better or for worse, is a great way to get the message.
I would just say it's a really nice forum. Actually, it's really easy.
Yeah, so Instagram, and you know, I hope to be able to talk to you more about this and help you get more content out there into the world, because a lot of people are super interested in the experiences that you've had in your message, and trust me, my comments support that. And thank you for everything you've done. And you know, stay safe.
All right. Cheers, mates.
Absolutely, guys. Talk soon. Let's finish up here for a second. That was fantastic. Not that I had any doubt, but that was great. Thanks, guys. Yeah, Chris, I was trying to tell everybody, I was like, this is a special guy. This is going to be a super interesting discussion, and it was. Giles, you're not going to be last. You're not going to be able to hack the system. Amazing. I mean, if you want to try to put into perspective and dissect where America's at right now, I mean, that was the conversation we needed to have. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's hard to choose a favorite. I've had so many great discussions, but that was spectacular. And just, there's so many things that oh, he's the coolest, man. There's just so many things that we read, the types of stories we read about. We read about addiction. We read about poverty. We read about the working class. But let's be honest, just because we drove through, you know, downtown or maybe a little bit east of downtown at some point, we don't know this stuff. Just because we interact with some working class people in our non-working class communities on a day-to-day or week-to-week or month-to-month basis, that doesn't mean that this is a guy who went and put his money where his mouth is. He went and lived and breathed this experience, and what he saw is invaluable. So everybody, thank you guys for joining tonight. I hope you enjoyed it as much and learned as much as I did. I think you did. And we'll have some more great stuff coming soon. Talk to everybody later.